Step back from my fence, Deborah snapped, fingers clenched around my wife's dress as threads popped like tiny gunshots. Violation notice stands. Remove the bush or face daily fines. Let go of her, I said, steadying Samantha as warm wind hissed through the rose leaves and the sprinkler ticks counted seconds we wouldn't get back. You think I won't enforce this? Her smile was thin as a clipboard's edge. You're not special. The rules are. Here's the part you missed, I said evenly. That grading you approved last month sent water into the gazebo footing. The concrete was wicking moisture already. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. I'm Ethan Cole, I added, lifting Samantha's torn hem free. Civil engineer, residential compliance. My mother planted this rose when Oak Ridge Meadows was still fresh paint and mud. You don't get to erase that. Samantha's breath trembled against my shoulder. The torn fabric brushed my knuckles like a broken promise. The roses carried my mother's perfume, sun-warmed and stubborn, rising above sprinkler mist. That bush wasn't decoration. It was the last thing we had of her hands in this soil. Samantha had tended it through a nervous pregnancy, whispering to the petals like they could steady her heartbeat. Neighbors hovered on the sidewalk. A camera phone blinked. Jared, the HOA's security contractor, loitered near the mailboxes. The sprinkler clicked off and the lawn sighed, water sinking where I knew it didn't belong. Daily fines begin tomorrow, Deborah said, voice sweet with a curdled victory. Refusal escalates. Escalation cuts both ways, I said. My palm rested on the post where my mother tied a ribbon when we moved in. The paint felt chalky. You'll want to check subgrade drainage before you celebrate. Her gaze drifted to the gazebo beyond the cul-de-sac. Fresh mulch, bright benches, shadows pooling under the roofline. I could almost hear the hollow knock if I tapped the pier. Damp concrete speaks. A gust pushed the torn hem against Samantha's leg. She steadied herself and nodded at me. The old habit slotted in. Breathe, assess, act. Heat pressed down, and with it the sweet rot smell from overwatered planters by the HOA sign. Water seeks the easiest path, and bad decisions do too. I'd watched a crew dump extra soil near the swale last week. No forms, no filter sock. Where are you watching from? I asked the neighbors, not taking my eyes off Deborah. Because this is our yard, and this is where it started. She flinched it started. I stepped to the rose, careful of the thorns. My fingertips came away damp from overspray. You're on notice too, I said quietly. Those footings absorbed water because the grading you okayed flattened the swale. Capillary action doesn't care about your clipboard. Deborah straightened as if height could replace authority. You don't get to lecture me. I didn't need to, I said. The concrete already did. A murmur rolled along the sidewalk. Linda Tran stood behind the circle, arms folded tight, eyes flicking between Deborah and the rose. Samantha squeezed my hand. I'm okay, she whispered, though her fingers told another truth. I eased my jacket over her shoulders, and the weight of it grounded both of us. Here's how this goes, Deborah said. Remove the bush by Friday, or the board votes to lean. You're promising more than you can deliver, I said, already mapping gradients and the dull tap I expected at the gazebo. I pictured the edge darkening, the smell of damp lime, the hammer finding soft resistance. My mother taught me to listen before I measured. Today the ground had already talked. If you've ever seen someone cross the line and thought, enough, subscribe and keep watching, because this is where everything changed. I guided Samantha toward the porch. Gravel grated under my shoes. The sky held late summer copper, making shadows long. Behind us, Deborah's heels clacked away, sharp, victorious, unearned. She thought she'd won because she'd drawn blood from a dress. She had no idea the ground beneath her victory was already failing, and I was just getting started. By the next morning, the sprinkler lines hissed again, that same steady rhythm tapping against the windows like a metronome for anger. Samantha slept late, exhaustion wrapping her in silence. I made coffee, black and sharp, and stared out at the rosebush, its petals already open to the early sun. The torn edge of her dress still hung on the fence post where Deborah had grabbed her. I hadn't moved it. Let the fabric remind me what lines had been crossed. Down the street, A maintenance truck idled beside the white mailbox cluster. The HOA seal gleamed on the side, an emblem of tidy control. I stepped outside, and the heat carried the smell of fresh paint from the sign they'd re-lettered last week. Order creates harmony. The irony tasted bitter. Across the road, Mr. Halpern waved from his porch. His lawn looked immaculate, but his eyes darted to the truck, then to me, nervous. "They fined me for repainting the shutters," he muttered when I reached him. "Said the color was too cream. I sent them the manufacturer code. Turns out Deborah just didn't like the finish." He sighed, thumb brushing the edge of a violation notice pinned to his clipboard. It was always the same story. Control disguised as compliance. A woman down the block got a citation for wind chimes. Another for unapproved garden art. And every time, Deborah smiled through it, her clipboard the instrument of humiliation. I listened, jotting notes on my phone. "Has she filed copies of these notices with the county?" I asked. He frowned. "No idea. Does she have to?" "She should," I said. "Any HOA with enforcement power has to maintain compliance records. If she hasn't, she's operating outside her charter." His brows lifted. A flicker of hope crossed his face like a match flare in the dark. By noon, I'd gathered 4 similar stories. The pattern wasn't random. It was targeted, emotional, selective. But the engineer in me didn't deal in feelings. I dealt in systems. And systems left signatures. That afternoon, I walked the path past the community gazebo. The concrete piers had darkened since yesterday. Fine white salt lines crawled up from the base. Efflorescence, sure sign of trapped moisture. I crouched, pressing my thumb against the grain. Damp. Not surface wet, but deep set, structural. Exactly what happens when subgrade drainage fails. A quiet voice came from behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned to see Linda Tran, HOA secretary, clipboard hugged to her chest. Her expression was caught halfway between duty and apology. "Deborah doesn't want residents inspecting common areas." "I'm not inspecting," I said, standing. "I'm observing." She looked around nervously. "You should file a maintenance request if you think something's wrong." "There's more than something wrong," I said, lowering my voice. "These footings are leaching. If they crack, that gazebo becomes a liability for every homeowner here." Linda's eyes flicked to the foundation, then back to me. "You don't understand," she whispered. "She doesn't let us—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Just be careful." She turned away, walking fast toward the office building at the edge of the lot. Her hesitation told me more than any document could. I noted the direction she glanced before leaving. The storage shed behind the office, padlocked but new, out of place among weathered walls. The air shimmered with heat as I followed the sidewalk home. Each step built the quiet drumbeat of realization. This wasn't just a personal attack. Deborah was hiding negligence behind the facade of authority. The kind of negligence that could cost people their homes. Samantha met me at the porch. "You've been gone all day," she said softly. The tired smile didn't reach her eyes. "I needed to see something," I said. "The gazebo's footing's compromised. If they keep running sprinklers that close, we'll have a collapse in a few months." She placed her hand over her belly. "You're turning this into a war." "It already is one," I said. "I just finally know the terrain." Behind her, the torn dress still swayed on the fence post. I left it there. It wasn't evidence, it was a marker. A reminder that the line between abuse of power and destruction had been crossed long before the fabric tore. From the corner of my eye, I saw Linda pause at her mailbox, eyes fixed on me for a heartbeat too long before she disappeared into her house. The crack had opened. The witness was watching, unsure which side to stand on. I looked back toward the gazebo one last time. Water glinted along the base like a warning. Beneath the perfect lawns and painted fences, Oak Ridge Meadows was starting to rot, and the woman holding the clipboard didn't even know it yet. The next HOA meeting was held in the community office, a single-story brick building that smelled like printer toner and fear. The air conditioner hummed louder than the conversations. Deborah sat at the center table, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Her lipstick was sharp, her posture sharper. I took a seat near the back, where the fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed like nervous thoughts. Neighbors filled the plastic chairs one by one. You could feel the tension in the way no one spoke above a whisper. The agenda sheet listed landscape violations, budget allocation, and finally, resident complaints. That last one was a ticking fuse. Deborah tapped the microphone. "Let's keep this civil," she said, eyes finding me immediately. "We have limited time and many residents with questions." I leaned forward, letting her words settle before standing. "My question's short," I said. "Why are fines being issued without compliance records filed with the county?" A ripple moved through the room. Someone coughed. Deborah smiled, polite, condescending. "We maintain our records internally, Mr. Cole. County oversight doesn't apply to association infractions." "Actually," I said, "under Section 3833.3 of the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, any HOA exercising enforcement power must maintain public records for accountability. Internal isn't enough." Her smile didn't falter, but her fingers tightened around the microphone base. "You're mistaken." I shook my head. "I'm an engineer. I don't guess. I verify." The crowd stirred again. Behind Deborah, Linda Tran sat at a smaller desk, typing meeting minutes. Her shoulders were drawn tight, posture almost defensive. Every few keystrokes, her eyes flicked toward Deborah, then toward me. I caught it, a silent plea, or maybe a warning. Deborah's tone cooled. "Mr. Cole, if you'd like to discuss your personal violation, we can schedule a private meeting." "It's not personal when half the neighborhood's under threat," I said. "And it's not a violation when your enforcement contradicts state law." A few people clapped, tentative, embarrassed. Deborah raised her hand sharply, silencing them. "Outbursts will end this meeting." Her control was slipping, but only slightly. She shifted papers, voice crisp. "Moving on to the gazebo maintenance update." That caught me. I watched Linda hesitate, fingers hovering over her keyboard. Deborah's tone grew rehearsed. "The board has reviewed the structure and determined it is stable. Minor cosmetic wear. Only, no further inspection required. Stable." The word rang false. I stood again. "That's interesting," I said, "because efflorescence on the south footing indicates moisture intrusion. I've worked on over 100 similar foundations. You can ignore cracks, but gravity won't." "Mr. Cole," she snapped, "sit down." Linda froze mid-keystroke. The cursor blinked on the projection screen beside her. Every eye flicked to it. For half a second, her mouth opened, then closed again. The tension in her jaw said everything. She'd seen the same damage I had. She just couldn't say it. "I'll sit," I said quietly, lowering myself back into the chair. "But when that structure shifts, I'll make sure the liability lands exactly where it belongs." Deborah moved on fast, but the air didn't recover. Each item on the agenda passed like a cough in a church. Awkward, forced, barely holding form. After the meeting, the crowd thinned. I waited until Linda was alone by the printer, shuffling papers into a folder. "You saw it too," I said. She flinched. "I don't know what you mean." Her voice trembled just enough to betray her. Her fingers clutched the edge of the folder, knuckles whitening. "I just take notes," she said, eyes down. "You typed faster when she said the word stable," I said. "Because it wasn't true." She looked at the door, then at me. Her lower lip caught between her teeth. The fluorescent hum seemed to fill the space between us. "You shouldn't push her," she whispered. "She keeps files on everyone, people who question her. Things happen." "Then she's afraid," I said. "And fear's a system flaw. Systems with flaws can be fixed." Her gaze lifted, small, flickering courage. "If I had proof," she said under her breath, "would you use it?" "Proof of what?" But she didn't answer. She gathered her folder and slipped out the side door, leaving a faint scent of toner and jasmine lotion behind. The lights buzzed overhead. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the mountains, low and slow. I watched her walk to her car, shoulders hunched against a storm that hadn't started yet. Her fear told me more than any document could. Deborah's empire was cracking, and the person holding the minutes might soon become the one who ended her reign. The storm finally broke the next day, rain slanting hard enough to blur the view through my office window. I sat in my truck, parked across from the HOA office, watching water run down the gutters that weren't draining right. Even from here, I could see the pooling, low points where there shouldn't be any. For an engineer, water tells the truth faster than people do. Deborah's silver sedan was already in her reserve spot. Figures. She always arrived early, like intimidation had business hours. I waited until the rain eased into a drizzle before stepping out. The air smelled of wet mulch and ozone. My boots sank slightly into the soft ground, the kind of compression that meant poor compaction beneath the sod. Another shortcut. Another rule broken by the rulemaker. Inside the office, the temperature swung from humid to Arctic. Deborah stood at the counter, speaking low to Jared, the security contractor. They stopped when they saw me. "Mr. Cole," she said, adjusting her blazer, "we prefer resident schedule appointments." "I'm not here to complain," I said. "I'm here to inform." I set my phone on the counter and played a short clip. Yesterday's video of rainwater gurgling against the gazebo's south footing. "You said cosmetic wear. That's active seepage." Her expression didn't move. "Residents are not authorized to inspect common structures." "I didn't inspect," I said. "I recorded what anyone could see." Jared shifted his weight beside her, arms crossed. His jacket bore the HOA logo, a circle around the phrase "preserving perfection." I almost laughed. Deborah's eyes, though, sharpened. "If you continue harassing board operations, we'll escalate this legally." "Harassment?" I asked. "Reporting structural decay isn't harassment. It's negligence when ignored." She leaned forward. "You think your degree makes you untouchable, Mr. Cole, but I've seen professionals bury themselves under paperwork." I met her stare, calm. "And I've seen foundations fail under pressure?" A beat of silence. The air conditioner kicked louder. Jared looked between us, uncertain which way the power shifted. Deborah straightened. "You're fined again for unauthorized video recording on HOA property." That almost made me smile. "Add it to the list." I left before she could savor it. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the gutters overflowed, sheets of water cascading onto the sidewalk. I crouched by the curb and followed the flow line with my eyes. The drainage slope was wrong. It angled back toward the greenbelt instead of away. A lazy grading job, probably from the last landscape overhaul. Every drop of water told the same story. Someone cut corners, and Deborah covered it with fines. That night, Samantha sat at the kitchen table, rubbing her belly while scrolling through community posts on her phone. "She's doubled the late fees," she said quietly. "And people are scared. Look, half these comments are anonymous." I read a few. Can't afford another penalty. She threatened to suspend pool access. No one else wants to speak up. Samantha met my eyes. "You're the only one standing against her." "Not for long," I said. "Fear only holds when people think the system works. Once they see the flaw, it collapses." Lightning flickered beyond the window, reflecting off the wet driveway. I opened my laptop and began mapping the neighborhood's water flow, overlaying it with the HOA's improvement plan from last year, the one Deborah bragged about in the newsletter. The grades didn't align. Whoever signed off on the final drainage configuration ignored the existing swale design entirely. Each mismatched contour was another thread to pull. My fingers moved automatically, plotting elevation differentials, calculating runoff rates. Rainwater, I realized, had been directed toward the gazebo since the last beautification project, and Deborah had been the one who approved it. When the map finished rendering, I stared at the screen. There it was, the proof of systemic failure, hiding in plain sight. Not in some secret folder, not buried in a basement. Out here, in the math of earth and water. A soft voice pulled me back. "You're smiling," Samantha said. "That's either good or dangerous." "Both," I said. "Tomorrow she's holding an emergency meeting about non-compliant landscaping. That means me." "And you're going?" "Of course." I closed the laptop and looked out at the rosebush glowing under the porch light, raindrops trembling on the petals. My mother used to say, "Water remembers where it came from." Maybe this fight wasn't about rules at all. Maybe it was about reminding the ground who it belonged to. By morning, the sky had cleared, leaving the streets of Oak Ridge Meadows smelling like wet concrete and fertilizer. The calm was deceptive, the kind that settles right before something breaks. I walked toward the community office, coffee in hand, passing neighbors who avoided eye contact but lingered near windows. Everyone knew the emergency meeting wasn't about landscaping, it was about control. Inside, the chairs were arranged in a stiff semicircle facing the podium. Deborah stood behind it, voice already clipped and polished. "We're here to address a resident's repeated disregard for HOA procedure," she said, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on me. Non-uniform plantings, unauthorized recordings, defamation of board integrity. I took a seat in the front row. Integrity's a funny word, I said. Depends how well your concrete holds up under stress. A whisper ran through the room. Deborah ignored it. The board reserves the right to issue compounding fines and pursue lien action if violations persist. I stood slowly. Before you rush into that, let's clarify something. The HOA's improvements over the last 2 years, were they reviewed by a certified engineer before approval? Her mouth tightened. Our landscaping committee oversaw all projects. Then you're admitting there was no engineering review for drainage alterations near common structures? A murmur spread. Deborah's cheeks reddened, but she masked it with a smirk. Mr. Cole, unless you're offering your services pro bono, your speculation has no bearing here. I turned to the neighbors. Speculation doesn't leave mineral rings on concrete. Facts do. I pulled out my tablet, projecting the drainage map I'd modeled last night. This is Oak Ridge Meadows as it stands. The swale that used to direct runoff away from the gazebo, flattened during the last beautification. The result? Water saturating the footings. If left unchecked, that gazebo becomes a hazard, and liability shifts directly to the board. Someone gasped. Deborah's composure cracked for half a second before she regained her tone. You're fear-mongering. Am I? I zoomed in on a photo I'd taken that morning. Fresh cracks spiderwebbing across the south pier. That wasn't there 2 weeks ago. Moisture expansion's already at work. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Jared, the security contractor, shifted uneasily near the back door. Deborah finally exhaled through her nose. You've overstepped, Mr. Cole. You're not authorized to present data. Yet, here we are, I said. And now, everyone's seen it. Linda sat near the wall, hands folded tight in her lap. Her face was pale, eyes fixed on the projection, not Deborah. I caught the tremor in her fingers as she scribbled something on her notepad, a motion of guilt, not duty. Deborah's voice went cold. Meeting adjourned. This presentation will be stricken from the record. I raised an eyebrow. That's not how minutes work, and you know it. She slammed her folder shut. Security will escort you out. I looked at Jared, who hesitated. You sure you want to touch this one? I asked him. Once the inspector sees those cracks, whoever ignored them is on the hook. That won't be me. The silence was heavy enough to feel. Jared lowered his hand and stepped aside. Deborah's nostrils flared, but she forced a smile. Enjoy your day, Mr. Cole. Outside, the sunlight hit my face like a spotlight. I could still feel the collective pulse of the room behind me. Fear, anger, awakening. People had seen too much to pretend anymore. At home, Samantha met me on the porch, worry etched deep. You pushed her too far. She's been too far since she ripped your dress, I said. Now it's just visible. She touched the rosebush gently, brushing off a leaf. You think this will end well? It'll end right, I said. That's enough. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered. A low voice said, You don't know me, but you're right about the gazebo. Check the inspection files at the city office. Ask for Rivera. The call ended before I could reply. The number showed as blocked. I stood there, listening to the hum of cicadas rising over the quiet street. Someone else knew, someone inside the system. That was my next step. The HOA could bury minutes and rewrite memos, but they couldn't rewrite physics, and they definitely couldn't stop a city record. The game had changed. The professional in me finally had an opening, and Deborah's empire had just developed a fault line too deep to ignore. I drove to the city inspection office that same afternoon, rain streaks still drying on. The windshield. The building was old, a leftover from the 70s with faded blue trim and the smell of dust and coffee. The receptionist pointed me toward a corner cubicle marked Building Compliance, R. Rivera. Inside sat a man in his 40s with a weathered face, sleeves rolled up, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many half-finished jobs. You must be the HOA guy who called earlier, he said. His handshake was firm but distracted, like his brain was already running blueprints. Rivera, city inspector. What's the problem? Drainage failure in Oak Ridge Meadows, I said. Specifically around a gazebo, the HOA claims is structurally sound. He leaned back in his chair. I remember that one. They submitted a self-certification 2 months ago. No third-party review. That hit harder than I expected. No engineering sign-off at all? Rivera shook his head. None. HOA projects under 25,000 can bypass external review if they maintain original grading. But if your map's right, they didn't. I pulled out my tablet and showed him the overlay. The moment his eyes narrowed, I knew I wasn't crazy. That angle shouldn't slope inward, he muttered. That's textbook runoff redirection. So, what happens if the board knowingly falsified that certification? He whistled softly. Then they're liable under municipal code for negligence. Could mean fines or suspension of their operating license if proven. I exhaled slowly. The path was opening. Legal, clean, undeniable. Can you confirm it officially? Rivera hesitated. I can file a preliminary notice of inspection, but it'll need a trigger, something public, like a resident complaint. You file, I inspect. Done, I said. When can you visit the site? Tomorrow morning, early. As I left, thunder rolled in the distance again, echoing against the parking lot asphalt. I didn't believe in omens, but the timing was poetic. Back home, Samantha sat curled on the couch, the glow from her phone painting her face soft gold. She posted about you, she said, scrolling. Deborah put out a community notice. Resident spreading false claims. She even named you. I read the post. Half-truths and venom wrapped in formal language. She accused me of harassment, misrepresentation, even damaging community morale. It was desperate, transparent, and exactly what I needed. She just gave me the trigger, I said. Samantha frowned. You're enjoying this. Not the fight, I said. The precision. Bullies love noise, but the system responds to evidence. The phone buzzed again. An email from the HOA office, subject line. Notice of escalating violation. Deborah wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was digging deeper, thinking intimidation could stop a foundation from failing. Linda texted right after, "She's losing control. Be careful tonight." I stared at the message, thumb, hovering over the keyboard. "Thanks," I finally wrote back. "You okay?" Her reply came fast. "Not really." She made me rewrite parts of the minutes, said if I didn't she'd reconsider my volunteer status. The words made my jaw tighten. Volunteer status. That's how people like Deborah kept power, by pretending their cruelty was administrative. Linda's cracking, I told Samantha. If she breaks, we get the inside view. Or she gets hurt, she said quietly. I won't let that happen. The next morning came cold and gray. Rivera's truck rolled into Oak Ridge Meadows just as the first sprinklers came on, mist catching the light. Deborah was waiting, hands on her hips, postured defiant. "Inspector Rivera?" she said sweetly. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Routine follow-up," he said, clipboard ready. Resident filed a drainage complaint. Her smile thinned. "Mr. Cole, I presume?" I stood by the rosebush, hands in my pockets. Public records work fast. Rivera walked the path toward the gazebo, kneeling by the base. The moment he touched the concrete, his expression hardened. "That's moisture intrusion," he said, "and not minor." Deborah's tone shifted. "You can't just—" He cut her off. "Ma'am, this is a safety matter. We'll need to review the original permits and contractor documentation." For the first time, Deborah didn't have a response. I looked past her toward Linda's house. The blinds twitched, a shadow moved. She was watching, same as before, but this time, I saw resolve where fear used to live. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the sound of the first crack widening. By evening, the entire neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Rivera's inspection had spread faster than any memo Deborah could draft. Cars slowed near the gazebo, neighbors pointing at the white residue streaking the base like the start of rot. Deborah tried to spin it, sent out a community email blaming unseasonal humidity. It fooled no one. I was in my garage drafting a runoff simulation when headlights flared across the driveway. A car door slammed, followed by hurried footsteps. When I opened the door, Linda stood there, hair damp from rain, fingers trembling around a manila folder. "I can't keep this," she said, shoving it into my hands. "Linda, slow down. What is it?" Minutes, emails, board correspondence, everything she made me edit. Her voice cracked. She told me to delete references to the contractor, said if anyone asked, the job was verified. I set the folder on the workbench. "You understand what this means?" She nodded, eyes darting toward the street. It means I'm finished here. She'll find out I took them. Samantha came out, robe wrapped around her, worry written all over her face. Linda, come inside, please. Inside the living room, the rain pattered soft against the windows. Linda sat on the edge of the couch, shoulders hunched, hands twisting. Every few seconds she glanced at the door, like she expected Deborah herself to barge in. She kept 2 sets of minutes, she whispered, the official one and the one she sent to the state HOA registry. In those, she removed the maintenance concerns we logged months ago. The board voted for an inspection before the regrading, but she canceled it, said it was unnecessary delay. I flipped through the printouts, scanning email chains full of timestamps and directives. There it was, Deborah instructing the contractor to proceed without engineering review. The digital signature was hers. Linda, this is the missing link, I said. Negligence and falsification. She used her authority to bypass procedure. Linda's voice dropped. She used my login to do it. That's why I can't stay. Samantha knelt beside her. You did the right thing. Linda's eyes glistened. It doesn't feel like it. Courage never does at first, I said. We heard thunder outside, low and rolling. I closed the folder carefully. These need to go to Rivera first thing in the morning. He'll log them as supplemental evidence. Once they're official, Deborah can't erase them. Linda nodded but didn't stand. You don't get it. She knows I've been uneasy. She'll come for me before that. She won't, I said. Not while I'm watching. She managed a shaky laugh. You're not exactly her favorite person either. That's why she'll underestimate me. The lights flickered as another surge of thunder rolled overhead. Samantha reached for Linda's hand. You can stay here tonight if you need to. Linda hesitated, then shook her head. I'll be fine. I just needed you to have that. She looked at me. Promise me you'll make it count. I promise. She left quickly, umbrella snapping open against the wind. I watched her taillights disappear past the gate, red fading into rain. When I turned back inside, Samantha was already at the dining table, scanning the emails. She really forged approvals? Worse, I said. She silenced anyone who questioned her, but now we've got proof in her own words. I pulled out my laptop, scanning through the attachments. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the drainage work and the gazebo project. She'd even signed off on the regrading change the same week the water rerouting began. This isn't just corruption, I said quietly. It's liability on a city level. Samantha placed a hand on my arm. So, what now? Now we prepare. Outside, rain hammered the street in rhythmic bursts. I opened a secure drive and began scanning each document, labeling and cataloging them with date, code reference, and authorization ID. It was slow, meticulous work, exactly my kind of war. When I finished, I shut the laptop and stared at the rosebush glowing faintly under the porch light, petals heavy with rain. Linda's in danger, Samantha said. Not if I move first, I answered. Because in systems like this, pressure didn't destroy truth, it exposed it. And Deborah had just given me the pressure I needed to bring her whole empire down. By dawn, the rain had stopped, leaving Oak Ridge Meadows scrubbed clean and silent, the kind of silence that came before a reckoning. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the rosebush glistening under the early sun. Each drop clung to the petals like proof that beauty could survive rot. Behind me, the laptop hummed quietly. Every file Linda had given me now scanned, time-stamped, and backed up twice. Samantha stepped out beside me, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. You didn't sleep, she said. I didn't need to, I said. I'm close. Close to what? Ending her? Exposing her. She nodded, though her expression stayed tight. Linda texted. She said Deborah's been calling board members all morning, trying to frame the inspection as harassment. That's fine, I said. She can spin it however she wants. The city won't care about gossip when the data's clean. I opened my tablet, reviewing the plan again. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday, 2 days away. I'd already requested Rivera's inspection report in writing and prepared a presentation package with overlays, legal citations, and the email evidence. The key was precision, not passion. I wasn't going to win by yelling, I'd win by being undeniable. Around mid-morning, I visited Halpern's porch again. He looked surprised to see me. She's doubling fines again, he said. Says we're feeding hostility. She's panicking, I said. That means we're close to something. He lowered his voice. You're planning something, aren't you? I'm planning to make the truth public, I said. But I'll need witnesses who've seen the pattern. Halpern hesitated. People are scared, Ethan. You know that. I do, but fear's her foundation, and it's starting to crack. Once Rivera's findings hit the record, she can't bury it. If we stand together, she's done. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll be there. One by one, I went door to door, quietly, deliberately, talking to neighbors who'd received violations, people who'd stayed silent for years, a mother fined for a basketball hoop, an elderly couple warned over non-compliant fencing. Each story was another brick in the wall Deborah had built around herself, and now those bricks were ready to fall. By evening, word had spread. Half the neighborhood planned to attend the meeting. For the first time, it wouldn't be Deborah's stage, it would be ours. At home, Samantha was printing color copies of the inspection photos. Rivera sent this, she said, sliding a document across the table. His preliminary report. The first line made me grin. Preliminary findings, evidence of improper grading, active moisture intrusion, and failure to maintain safe structural conditions. Below that, a note. Further investigation recommended due to potential falsified records. This is it, I said. The anchor point. Samantha touched the page carefully, as if afraid it might burn. It's more than you wanted. You can finally stop. I'm not stopping until it's public, I said. The community deserves to hear it straight. As night fell, Linda texted again. Deborah's furious. She called an emergency board session tomorrow morning. No residents allowed. I typed back, good, let her tighten her circle. Makes it easier to trace the panic. Then I opened a new file, Operation Transparency. Inside, I outlined the sequence. Rivera's report first, the photographic evidence second, Linda's confession third. Layered perfectly to collapse her authority in one motion. Samantha watched me work. You know, most people would have just moved away, she said softly. I don't walk away from bad design, I said. I fix it. She smiled faintly, exhaustion lining her face. Just make sure you come home from it. I nodded, saving the document. I intend to. Outside, the crickets started up, filling the night with their steady rhythm. Across the street, Deborah's house glowed with light in every window, her silhouette pacing back and forth, a figure trying to hold together a kingdom that was already collapsing. I sipped the last of my coffee and stared out into the dark. She still thought she could control the narrative, but she hadn't built for the one force she couldn't manipulate, gravity. And gravity, like truth, always wins. By Thursday morning, the neighborhood's unease had turned into anticipation. You could feel it in the way people lingered near their driveways, pretending to trim hedges or wash cars, just to catch glimpses of movement around Deborah's house. She'd become both warden and prisoner, windows drawn, phone pressed to her ear, issuing orders no one wanted to follow anymore. I'd spent half the night finalizing the evidence set, cross-referencing every timestamp, every email, and Rivera's inspection notes. I laid everything out in a single linear sequence, start to failure, decision to consequence. It read less like a vendetta and more like physics. If Deborah's corruption was a structure, this was the load calculation that would bring it down. Samantha brewed coffee as the printer whirred through the last page. You're scaring her, she said quietly. She scared everyone else first, I replied. This just evens the balance. Linda called around 9. Her voice trembled, but not from fear this time. She knows the inspection report exists, she said. She called the board in for signatures to amend the project file. She's trying to retroactively approve the grading. That's falsification in real time, I said. Keep any communication she sends. Don't respond. I saved the email thread, she said. It's in my drive under Garden Club, just in case she locks me out. That's smart, I said. We're almost there. By afternoon, I drove back to the gazebo, clipboard in hand. The air was heavy, the kind of late summer heat that makes even shadows sweat. Rivera's white truck was parked near the curb. He met me halfway down the path, nodding. Follow-up complete, he said. Moisture infiltration confirmed. I've already escalated to municipal review. Meaning? meaning the HOA's under formal investigation for improper certification. They'll receive notice by morning. The words settled between us like thunder before the flash. Deborah didn't know it yet, but her kingdom had just been condemned. When I returned home, I opened a group message thread, neighbors who'd agreed to attend tomorrow's meeting. I dropped a single line. Bring your letters, bring your stories. No shouting, no chaos. Just truth. One by one, the check marks lit up. That night, Samantha helped me sort the printed packets into folders, one for Rivera's report, one for the email evidence, one for the HOA charter violations. Feels like you're preparing for trial, she said. I am, I said. A public one. She brushed my shoulder. Promise me you'll keep it measured, no gloating. I don't need to gloat, I said. Facts do that for me. As we worked, the phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. A familiar voice hissed through the static. You think you've won, but you're just digging your own hole. People here like peace. You're ruining that. Deborah, I said calmly. Peace built on fear isn't peace. You're trespassing on HOA authority, she snapped. You'll regret this. The line went dead. Samantha exhaled slowly. She sounds cornered. She is, I said. And that's when structures fail fastest. I spent the next hour rehearsing the presentation quietly, timing each section to fit within the meeting's public comment window. Every phrase had to land like a hammer, concise, factual, irrefutable. The strategy wasn't to argue, it was to reveal. Outside, the night hummed with the low buzz of insects and distant sprinklers. The rosebush swayed slightly in the breeze, petals catching stray drops from the irrigation. I crouched beside it, touching the damp soil. My mother's voice came back to me in memory. Always build with respect for what holds you up. Tomorrow, I'd remind the whole neighborhood what that meant. At midnight, I opened the garage and loaded the folders into a weatherproof case. The faint smell of rain and ink filled the air, proof and preparation blending into purpose. I could see Deborah's porch light across the street still burning, a sentinel against the truth she couldn't contain. Samantha appeared in the doorway. "You're ready?" she said. I looked at the case in my hands. "No," I said. "The neighborhood is." Because tomorrow, Oak Ridge Meadows would finally see the foundation it had been standing on, and the woman who had built it to fail. Friday dawned pale and heavy, the sky a dull silver sheet that promised rain but refused to deliver it. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 6, but by noon I could already feel the tension vibrating through the neighborhood. Cars lined the curbs. Conversations stopped when Deborah's front door opened. Oak Ridge Meadows had become a waiting room for justice. Inside, I spread my materials across the dining table one last time. Rivera's inspection notice, Linda's emails, the HOA charter excerpts, and the printed photos showing water intrusion. Each sheet was clean, sharp-edged, undeniable. I wasn't walking into a fight tonight. I was walking into a calculation. Samantha placed a sandwich beside my arm. "Eat," she said. "Engineers don't win wars on an empty stomach." I smiled. "You've been listening to my mother's sayings again." "She had good ones," Samantha said softly, glancing toward the rose bush outside. "She'd be proud of you." "Let's make sure I give her a reason to be," I said. At 5:30, we walked together to the community center, where the meeting would take place. The air smelled like cut grass and static, the calm before a storm that everyone felt but couldn't name. The parking lot was full. Dozens of neighbors milled around the double doors, clutching papers, whispering. Deborah stood near the entrance in her usual blazer. Clipboard clutched like a shield. When she saw me, her smile flickered. Too bright, too brittle. "Mr. Cole," she said, "here to make another spectacle?" "Just here to talk about drainage," I said evenly. Her jaw twitched. "You've caused chaos in this community. I hope you're ready to accept the consequences." "I am," I said. "Are you?" For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, the enforcer and the engineer. Then she turned sharply, heels clicking against the tile as she marched inside. The meeting room filled fast. Every seat was taken, residents spilling into the aisles. The hum of low voices filled the air. Linda sat at the front desk, her hands folded over a single notepad. She met my eyes briefly, nodding once. That was enough. The board called the meeting to order. Deborah cleared her throat, voice amplified through the cheap mic. Before we begin, I'd like to address the misinformation circulating about recent maintenance projects. I raised my hand before she could continue. Point of order, I said. Her smile turned razor thin. You'll have your turn, Mr. Cole. According to the HOA charter, residents may present material evidence relevant to safety concerns before general announcements, I said, holding up the document. Section 4.7. The murmur in the room grew louder. Deborah blinked, realizing she couldn't legally shut me down without confirming I was right. Fine, she said through her teeth. You have 3 minutes. I stood, carrying the waterproof case to the projector stand. Thank you. The first image appeared on the screen, a wide shot of the gazebo's south footing. White streaks of efflorescence glowed under the light. This, I began, is the result of improper grading and drainage alterations approved under HOA authorization. You called it cosmetic wear. Inspector Rivera called it structural moisture intrusion. A ripple of whispers spread. Deborah tried to interrupt, but I kept going. Here's the grading map, signed off by the board without engineering review. And here, I tapped the next slide, is the email from your office canceling that review. Same timestamp, same week. Gasps filled the room. Someone in the back said, "Is that legal?" Another answered, "Not even close." Deborah's face blanched. "This data is misinterpreted. Rivera's report is public record," I said. "Filed this morning. You can't redact physics, Deborah." The last slide appeared, a photo of the rosebush, roots surrounded by wet soil. "You tried to find me for this," I said, "for a living thing my mother planted. But while you chased perfection, your own foundation was failing beneath you, literally." Silence fell. Not the kind born of fear. This was something heavier. Realization. Deborah reached for the mic, but Linda rose first, her voice trembling but steady. "The records are accurate," she said. "I filed them, and I was told to change them." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Deborah froze, lips parting soundlessly. I turned to the neighbors. This isn't just about one bush. It's about every time someone used power to humiliate instead of serve. We built this neighborhood. We pay for it. We deserve better. The crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. A slow, deliberate rising sound that made Deborah's clipboard tremble. Samantha caught my eye from the back, tears shining, but proud. And for the first time, Deborah looked small. The sound of applause still rang in my ears long after it faded. The board tried to gavel the room back to order, but there was no order left. Only truth, loud and echoing off the community center walls. I stood where I was, hands steady, while Deborah fought to breathe through her own crumbling authority. "Enough!" she barked into the mic. "This meeting is suspended until further notice." "No," Linda said quietly from her seat. "It isn't." Every head turned. She stood, shaking but resolute, the notepad clutched to her chest like armor. "You told me to delete inspection requests, Deborah. You said, we'll make it look official later. I did it because I was afraid of losing my position, but I'm done being afraid." The crowd went silent. Even the air felt still. Deborah's voice wavered. "You're misremembering. There's no record of that conversation." "There's an email," Linda said. "I forwarded it to the city inspector this morning." The gasp that followed was sharp enough to cut the quiet in half. Deborah's mouth opened, then shut again. Her face flushed crimson as she fumbled through her folder, pretending to look for something that could save her. Rivera rose from the back row, city badge clipped to his belt. "For the record," he said, "the correspondence has been received. The city is opening a full review of Oak Ridge Meadows HOA." You could feel the room exhale. A collective release years in the making. Deborah's voice cracked. "You have no jurisdiction." Rivera stepped forward. "Ma'am, you falsified documentation on a permitted structure. Jurisdiction's not your problem. Liability is." The board members next to her began whispering frantically. One of them, a heavyset man with thinning hair, finally leaned away from her microphone. "We didn't know she canceled the review," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Linda's eyes glistened. "You did. You just didn't want to challenge her." It was the truest line of the night. The tension broke with murmurs, then shouts of agreement. Residents began standing, speaking over one another, complaints, confessions, relief. Everything that had been whispered behind fences now spilled into the open like floodwater, finally finding release. Samantha stood near the back, her hands clasped over her belly. When she caught my eye, she gave a small nod, the kind of signal that said, "It's done." I turned to Deborah, who had gone very still, staring at her clipboard like it was a lifeline. "You could have fixed this," I said quietly, just for her. "All you had to do was listen." She didn't look up. Rivera's radio crackled. "Copy that," a voice said through static. "City investigator en route." Deborah finally moved, snatched her handbag, gathered her papers, and stormed toward the exit. Cameras flashed as residents recorded her retreat. The sound of her heels striking tile was drowned out by something bigger. Applause, not for me, but for each other. For every person she'd silenced who finally got to speak. Linda sank back into her chair, tears spilling freely. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," I said. She shook her head. "We did." Rivera approached, extending his hand. "You handled this the right way. Data, not chaos. That's rare." "Physics doesn't care about pride," I said. "It only cares about force." He smiled faintly. "Well, you applied just enough." As the crowd began to thin, people lingered to talk, to thank, to apologize to one another. The sound wasn't noisy anymore. It was human, warm, relieved. Samantha made her way through them, resting her hand on my arm. "She's gone," she said softly. "Yeah," I said, looking toward the door where Deborah had vanished. "But the damage she caused will need repair." "Then we'll rebuild," Samantha said. The lights flickered once before steadying. Rain began tapping against the windows again, gentle this time, like a benediction. I exhaled slowly, tension bleeding from my shoulders. For months, Oak Ridge Meadows had been a facade, perfect lawns, perfect smiles, all hiding cracks beneath. Now, for the first time, it felt real, imperfect, honest. I looked toward the rosebush visible through the glass door, glowing faintly in the stormlight. My mother's voice echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. "Stand your ground, but know why you're standing." Tonight, I finally did. The morning after the confrontation, Oak Ridge Meadows felt different. The air was lighter, the silence cleaner. The weight that had pressed down on the community for years had lifted overnight, replaced by something fragile but alive, hope. I walked the familiar path toward the gazebo, sunlight glinting off puddles left by last night's storm. The cracks along the south footing were still visible, but Rivera had cordoned them off with yellow tape and a small notice. "Under city review, safety inspection pending." It was the first time that structure had ever worn a real warning sign. The truth was visible now, and that was enough. Neighbors waved as I passed. People who used to look through me now stopped to talk. Mrs. Halpern brought coffee out to her porch and smiled for the first time in months. "It's quiet," she said. "No emails, no threats." "Enjoy it," I said. "You earned it," she chuckled. "No, you did." But I knew that wasn't true. Systems fail when everyone stays silent. They heal when everyone finally speaks. By mid-morning, the city truck pulled in, Rivera stepping out with a folder under his arm. He nodded to me. "Official notice went out an hour ago," he said. "Langford suspended pending investigation. Interim board elections are scheduled for next week." I let out a long breath. "So it's real." "It's official," he said, then smiled. "And you're on the nomination list. Someone put your name in." I laughed. "Not a chance." Rivera shrugged. "Communities need builders, not just enforcers. Think about it." He left me standing there, the sound of his truck fading down the street. The neighborhood around me seemed to hum quietly, adjusting to freedom. Lawns no longer looked like obedience. They looked like ownership. At home, Samantha was watering the rosebush, gentle as always. The soil steamed faintly under the sun. She turned when she heard my steps. "It's over?" "Almost," I said. "She's out." Rivera confirmed it. Samantha smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to relief and exhaustion at once. "Your mother would have been proud." I crouched beside the bush, brushing a leaf between my fingers. "She'd say it took me long enough." We stood there for a while, listening to the sprinklers in the distance. For the first time, the sound wasn't menacing. It was ordinary, harmless. Life returning to rhythm. Linda arrived later that afternoon, clutching a paper bag with muffins and her ever-present notepad. Her eyes were red but lighter. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "You don't need to," I said. "You were the spark. Without you, none of this moves." She shook her head. "I just wanted to stop feeling afraid." "You did," I said. "That's how things change." She smiled. "I've been asked to help organize the new board elections." I said yes. "Good," I said. "They'll need someone who knows both sides." Before leaving, she looked at the rosebush and whispered, "It's beautiful. She'd like that it survived." After she drove off, Samantha sat beside me on the porch steps. The afternoon light caught her hair, and the breeze carried the smell of earth and petals. "You going to fix the gazebo?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Not for them, for us. For everyone who still believes you can build something honest and have it last." She leaned against my shoulder, her hand resting on her belly. The quiet stretched, comfortable now, the kind of quiet you don't want to end. I looked at the house, at the cracks in the sidewalk, at the small imperfections that made it ours. "Funny thing," I said, "she spent years chasing perfection, but perfection's just fear dressed up as order. Real strength's in the flaws." Samantha smiled. "Then we're strong as hell." We both laughed softly. The sun dipped low, painting the sky gold behind the gazebo's silhouette. The caution tape fluttered like a flag of surrender. I whispered to the wind, mostly to myself, "You can't control what's built on truth." If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.